Time being 7 o'clock, I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled council meeting of the town of Copper Canyon, May 9th, 2022. If you'd all stand, please, and face the flag and repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, and indivisible. Oh, welcome. I'd like to also announce, first of all, that the Mayor Pro Tem Steve Hill will not be here tonight. His father passed away this morning. So our blessings and prayers are with him and his family. First item of business tonight is public input. Anyone tonight may speak on an agenda or a non-agenda item for a period of 3 minutes. First person to speak tonight is Robin Douglas Davis.
Hi, I'm Robin Douglas Davis, 581 Jernigan Road. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank outgoing council member Jeff Mayer for his dedication, time, and hard work over the last 2 years. He has always done the right thing for our citizens. He has followed their wishes and represented their needs and desires for making this town what the citizens wanted, regardless of council wants. Thank you, Jeff, for having our residents' backs. Additionally, Mr. Foster, if you're here tonight, I understand that you're in need of some mulch. I am fortunate to have a friend with access to an industrial chipper who shredded tree trimmings for me since we have been on a burn ban for so long. They are native shredded tree trimmings. They're great for top dressing for my garden, mulch for my flower beds and trees. I have plenty, so I'm happy to share. Just give me a call and you can come over and get some. Thanks.
Thank you. Next person to speak is Jeff Lowery, please.
Hi, my name is Jeff Lowery at 1010 Valleywood Court. And I would like to also thank Jeff Mayer for his genuine care for the town of Copper Canyon and the hard work he puts forth for the town. My wife and I moved here roughly 3 years ago from Lantana, seeking what you might think, a little bit more acreage, a little more room between the houses. And we definitely enjoy our home here. We definitely appreciate the fact that Jeff has always supported the large acreage lots here and to keep them that way. Jeff and Gina have always kept us informed with issues in the town, always been a supporter of this town and genuinely cares. Whether it's representing the people's voices of the council or even the small things like water leak issues in my house, Jeff has always been there to support me, and I believe he does with the rest of the town of Copper Canyon. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Vic Moyles.
Hi, I'm Vic Moyles, 1021 Valleywood Court. I'd like to take a few minutes to recognize outgoing Councilman Jeff Mayer and his efforts toward improving our town. I know that Jeff, upon joining the council 2 years ago, has spent countless weekends traveling around our town, meeting residents and discussing issues. He has followed up on many of these with recommendations for action. Unfortunately, in most instances, the council and mayor, in my opinion, were antagonistic to his positions for no apparent reason. Again, my opinion is based on witnessing council meetings and the interactions between them. An example was the ethics ordinance written and passed during his first year on the council. About the same time the council voted to reduce the discretionary spending limit, I think that's how it goes, for the mayor. It was all good. Surrounding towns had their ethics codes. Why shouldn't Copper Canyon? Well, as many of you might be aware, one of the very first things with the new council, the mayor added to the very next council meeting agenda, repeal of both ordinances. The council voted in lockstep, except for Councilman Mayor, to repeal both. One of the council members said it was draconian. I guess it was a little too harsh. However, it was written by the previous council, so it wasn't too harsh for them. Someone else said the state had an ethics code, so Copper Canyon didn't need one. Well, if you indeed read the state code, you may still want a specific code for Copper Canyon. Think about it. Ethics code passed, new council, ethics code repealed. Oh, well. Again, I'd like to recognize Jeff and thank him for all his efforts in the past 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. Jonas Smith.
My name is Jonas Smith. I live in 1155 Crib Meadow Way in Copper Canyon. And I'm just taking this opportunity to, last year, I came here to voice my concern about an issue that I was having in my property. And Representative Jeff was pretty much the only one that actually followed up with me, took the time to actually come to my property, step in my patio, and actually listen to the issue. And I want to thank you so much for doing that, because you actually made me feel like I matter. You treated me with respect, like I was a human being. And I appreciate everything you've done. Thank you, sir. And you'll be missed.
Thank you. Nancy Henry.
Hi, I'm Nancy Henry. I'm going to try to read this. I had major surgery 2 weeks ago on my esophagus. And so my voice is real raspy. So I'm going to try to get through this fast what I'm reading. I'm Nancy Henry at 761 Lonesome Dove Lane. I'd like to congratulate Rudy and Chase on the election win and thank Dr. Larson and Catherine Vexler for volunteering to run for office. I know it's a hard thing to do. I want to recognize outgoing council member Jeff Mayer. Jeff Mayer has lived in Copper Canyon since 1985. I also want this included in the minutes, please. After 20 years, he retired from the Air Force, and after 36 years, retired as International 777 Captain with American Airlines International. Seems like yesterday when Jeff and Jenna and Vic and Vicky met with Rudy and Paul and me at Brass Tap when we asked Jeff to run for council place 5. Jeff, as a council member, has studied the ordinances and asked questions to make sure if it was fair and equitable for everyone from 1 acre to greater. Jeff participated in the town events, parades, shred day, etc. He's well known to drive all neighborhoods. And when he sees people in their garage or yard, stops and talks with them to make sure everything's good, or do they have any questions or issues they want him to address. Jeff Mayer is not self-serving and really cares about the residents. when Jeff told Bud and me last November he was not going to run for office again, we were very disappointed. We totally understood, as sometimes you have more freedom and no restrictions. I'm sorry. No, no, that's okay. It's just bad. Restrictions when not on council. One of the best rewards of Jeff deciding to run and being elected is our friendship we developed with Jeff and Jenna and Roger, the dog. We wish you the very best in the future endeavors, and hopefully our town will be included. Thank you for your service. We greatly appreciate you, Bud. Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Foster.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I'm Roger Foster. I'm an attorney and former prosecuting attorney. My wife, Khaki Roberts Libbert, and I live at 484 Copper Canyon Road. Chase Libbert is her son. On April 11th, I appeared before this council to complain about Councilman Jeff Baer acting under color of law against my wife and family. I have not been notified of any penalty assessed against Mr. Mayor because of my complaint, and I ask that he be sanctioned, reprimanded, or that some other penalty be imposed against him, and for these reasons. Number one, his actions were not only inappropriate, but they were in violation of the Texas Penal Code and of Title 18, Section 242 of the U.S. Constitution for acting beyond the bounds of lawful authority while pretending to act in the performance of official duties. Number two, on Saturday, January 25, 2020, then City Councilman Ted Stranzik came to my wife's ranch and accosted her son, Chase Libbert, who is our newly elected councilman, for using his road grader to level Lonesome Dove Lane. Mr. Stranzik gave Chase his councilman card and yelled at him, saying, "What makes you think you can grade that road? You have no right. You did not get a permit. Who gave you permission?" It may have just been coincidence that at that time, Chase was in a dispute with Nancy Henry, who lives on Lonesome Dove Lane, about Chase's use of that road. Chase made a formal complaint to this council regarding this incident, which, just like Jeff Mayer's action, was done under color of law and while pretending to act in the performance of official duties as a councilman. This council took no action on Chase's complaint and imposed no penalty against Mr. Stranzik. Had it done so, it would have been a clear warning to other councilmen, including Jeff Mayer, that being a councilman does not authorize you to go beyond your official duties to impose your will or personal beliefs on a citizen of this town. Khaki's father, Boots Roberts, served on this council for 8 years. Khaki has served as president of the Denton Board of Realtors, was the 2018 chairman of Texas Realtors, and is currently vice president of the National Association of Realtors. She is one of the most knowledgeable persons in this city and the state of Texas on land use planning, trends in housing, and other laws and rules that can affect Copper Canyon. And she has shared her time and knowledge by serving on our boards of adjustment and planning and zoning for several years. She is highly respected and well loved by the staff and board members of Copper Canyon with whom she has worked. Unwarranted attacks against her and my family are unacceptable, and I ask that they don't go unrebuked. Thank you.
Greg Brochure is speaking on behalf of Charlie Nichols.
Yeah, good evening. My name is Greg. I'm speaking on behalf of Charlie Nicholas, who is the owner of 800 CC Ranch Road, which is also known as Copper Canyon Ranch. It's about a little over 40 acres. We currently have 2 accessory buildings on there, and the request is to add a third. The 2 accessory buildings now are roughly in the center of the 40+ acre plat. They're around 50 to 60 feet away from each other. The third one we'd like to request would be an exact same proximity of the others and matching an identical color and material as the larger one. That's it. Thank you.
Cindy Owens.
Hello, my name is Cindy Owen and I live at 806 Haas Drive. I'm here to talk about, well, first of all, let me be very transparent. I'm not very active in these meetings, so I don't know a lot about what's going on, but I want to become more aware. And it's been brought to my attention that they are trying to change the building codes for outbuildings or shops on 1 acre lot to only 1,200 square feet. I've been traveling a lot and I'm not as up to date, so I hope this is accurate information. I feel it is, but I think it should be kept at the 2,000 as it was when we just built ours. We've lived here for 17 years. My husband always wanted a shop. We never built it because we have an odd shaped lot and we didn't want it to look awkward. So we finally decided we wanted to stay here for a while and he needs a shop. So we built it with the best way we could to look good in the neighborhood and we keep it very clean outside. And I just don't see the reason to downsize it for everybody else that's lived here. And that's what they expected when they moved here. So I just wanted to share my opinion.
Ted Stranzik, and Ted Stranzik. Ted, you want to do them all at once or you want to?
I'd like if it's okay with the mayor to address the Poindexter issue
Okay.
that's brought up and the accessory building that's brought up.
Okay, those are the only two you want to do tonight? Or you want to do the third one?
I'll do the first one.
Poindexter first?
No, Mr. Foster.
You're going to do Mr. Foster first, okay?
My name is Ted Stranzik. I live at 1020 North Berry Trail Court. You just heard Mr. Foster bloviate again about how his family and he in person have been so wounded by the actions of Mr. Council Member Jeff Mayer. Having been a former council member, I can attest that he has the purview of his position and done nothing wrong. Whatever laws you're quoting are really not really applicable, and if they're weak at best. When you look at everything that you've said, and 3 minutes is not enough time to critique and fact check everything you said the other week, but people who don't tell the truth, for whatever reason, they have to make a position that is, they cloud the issue by attacking the opponent with baseless, loud accusations, unfair treatment, and outright misrepresentations. The issues of access easement, the issues of a road, the issues of just things like the RV. What's wrong with asking somebody, is that RV occupied? Is it someone living in it? Your address to that was, well, there's 400 and some odd RVs in town. What's the big deal? Again, you just sidestep all the issues. Clever attorney, and that's your job, and I understand that. But the bottom line is it's disingenuous. The easement, Chase has a very good easement that runs right through Boots Ranch development. And he now can access the property correctly. But there's a question in my mind that that easement was granted after Boots Ranch was named as a gated community. So there's some legal issues. I brought that to the attention of our legal counsel a year ago, and at this point, nothing has been done. As far as the 40-year-old road, and Mayor, you made a comment to that effect, and that there's been a road there for 40 years. Well, most of you people know that I do due diligence. And there's a FEMA map dated 2015, before Boots Ranch was ever developed. If you can find a road on there, I'll give you whatever money you think you want. There's a cattle trail, there's crossing over Poindexter, and that trail leads to a farm pond. And it's a great field for grazing cattle.
But a road, there is no road. Never was a road until he built one. And the parameters and the ordinances with reference to that are quite frankly,
I move
Not
that he give
legal.
the council give him a little more time to complete his speech.
not at this time. All I will say is that the Mr. Mayor has been unjustly and incorrectly accused of any wrongdoing. And by the way, you say you're a resident of Copper Canyon, right?
Do you want to go on the Poindexter or do you want to think?
Now, I just want one more point, please, Mayor. Are you a resident of Copper Canyon or not?
It's not a debate.
I will make the statement that you,
You asked for them to address the council, not the audience.
okay,
So please address the council.
sorry, I apologize for that. It appears that Mr. Foster spoke incorrectly. He has a home in Dallas with a homestead exemption with his name on it. So enough said about disingenuous activity. Poindexter. Let me get to it, if you don't mind. By the way, it was a very good setup, guys. You guys did a very good job. A lot of good things have come out of that. I have just a couple of points because basically my question is, and part of this entire presentation has to be, what are the sources of water that flood this town? Where do they come from? And the bottom line is, there's two issues: Lantana, 6 areas that dump into our wonderful town, and post-construction stormwater runoff, an issue that will increase as our housing developments increase, the density of our housing increases. That needs to be addressed. There's also an issue about funding. I know that Donna and I worked with previously Gary Vickery on funding, and we actually did get some funding, but unfortunately it didn't qualify accordingly, and we elected to drop it. But in looking for funding, there's been a lot of issues of, we don't have the money, we don't do this, we don't do that. Well, if we can't find the money, let's hire somebody who can. There's a whole bunch of agencies out there that's what they do for a living. Why don't we contract with one of them? The third point I want to make is culpability. Most of the water that we are experiencing flooding our land right now comes from Lantana. We've had a big talk about taking just to the east of Copper Canyon Road, and somewhere in there making a big detention pond and taking private citizens' property to act as a detention pond. Well, in my looking at what's going on there, if we just went on the west side of Copper Canyon Road, there is a complete flood zone there that cannot be used for anything. And if we would work with Lantana, I think we can get those people to cooperate and build a detention pond there and stop the water before it comes into our town. And I would invite Mr. Dale for you to look at that. I had meetings with Kevin Mercer rather, about those issues, but COVID killed everything and the whole thing died. But that is something I'd like you guys to look at. There are ways to solve the problem and not necessarily on our property. And I think a little bit of thinking out of the box is necessary. So, accessory buildings. R1, R1A needs to remain at 2,000 square feet. Personal reason, I have a shop now that's about a little bit over 1,000 square feet, and I want to expand it by 50%. Can't do it under this current issue. I'd like some consideration for that to remain at the 2,000 square foot level. But what is even more important is rental property and Airbnb. I think that Mark Pate did just a superhuman job of setting all of the issues in some very constructive fashion. And he pointed out very, very succinctly that those two areas need to have more attention. And maybe that's something you guys can do in the July workshop. But we've really got to be careful. The unlimited amount of accessory buildings on some of the larger lots, that doesn't even sound reasonable. But we really need to be looking at what Airbnb is doing. We had a gentleman here that was in tears over the damage to his property by an Airbnb that's still in this town. We need to look at this and put some controls on it. Now, it's not going to be easy, but I think it needs to be done, and it needs to maybe even call in some experts to help us or see what other towns have been doing. But the rental issue also, there's a lot of options there. Okay, just spell them out, no big deal, and go from there. So that's what I have to say, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Deborah Edmondson.
That's me. Thank you. My name is Deborah Edmondson. I live at 1730 Tuscan Ridge Circle, which is in South Lake, Texas. I am here tonight. I'm an attorney representing Councilman Jeffrey Meyer. I was not planning to speak, but I do want to speak given the salacious and false accusations made by Mr. Foster earlier this evening, and also then to address the false accusations that he made at the last council meeting. My background is I've served on 2 different city councils, Fairview in Collin County, and also the city of South Lake. So I do know 1 or 2 things besides my legal training about what is and is not appropriate for council members to do. As I understand it, Mr. Mayor made appropriate inquiries to the appropriate town employee about activities he was told were going on certain addresses. The statutes that Mr. Foster quoted tonight have absolutely nothing to do with what Mr. Mayor was doing. He was acting appropriately within the scope of his ability and what his role allows him to do. And finally, people are certainly entitled to their own opinions. They're certainly entitled to not be happy about certain things, but they're not entitled to their own facts. Thanks.
Thank you. I know the town administrator, Donna, you have comments from Lisa Humphrey, Tina Burns, and George Bueller. Would you like to read those in?
On Monday, May 9th, 2022, as well as put it in the permanent record. Jeff was an enormous help in getting the creek that runs between my family's property and the Humphreys property worked on to keep it from eroding any more than it already has. He was diligent in his efforts to get the repairs done, and came out on many occasions to speak with my late husband, Jim, and I am grateful that he listened to our concerns and took them into consideration. I feel that Jeff cares greatly for his community and his desire to help the residents second to none. I personally am going to miss Jeff being on the town council, and I know Jim would have said the same. I also want to thank Jeff and his wife for coming to Jim's celebration of life at Tyler Park on Saturday, April 9th. I felt he and his wife were there not only as kind neighbors, but that Jeff was there representing the town of Copper Canyon. He wrote very kind words in Jim's memorial book. Thank you, Jeff. That means a lot to me. Thank you, Jeff, for devoting so much of your time to helping your fellow citizens of Copper Canyon, Texas. You would be remembered fondly as a great asset to our community. Jeff, I wish you the best and take care. And then Lisa.
Lisa Humphrey.
Hi, Sheila and Donna. I understand this will be Jeff Mayor's final town council meeting for his term on the Copper Canyon Town Council. I just want to make my public appreciation for Jeff and all his work for the people of Copper Canyon. In my interactions with Jeff, he was very generous. He was a very generous person with his time, providing in-person contact, discussions, and follow-up. He was always very approachable and expressed interest in concerns of the town. I greatly appreciated his engagement and involvement in the Creek project by 616 Shin Chapel. While it was a team effort, I know he was instrumental in getting the project approved and started. Thank you, Jeff, for making Copper Canyon a better place to live. Wishing you well in your future endeavors, Lisa Humphrey. And I've got one from George Blue. First of all, congratulations to the new members of the council and many thanks to all the candidates for their participation in the election. Finally, I would like to thank Jeff Mayer for his service to the town over the past several years. He has been a voice crying in the wilderness for many residents. Thank you much for your time and consideration, George and Sheila.
Okay, thank you. First of all, Jeff, I want to say, we may never agree, but I will tell you one thing, as a council, as a mayor in this industry for about 33 years now, I always respect anyone that takes their time to serve as a volunteer for any town in any position. We all may never agree, or we may agree sometimes, but the fact that the respect for doing that never goes away. So
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, and I can't tell you what all these comments have meant to me and stuff, and I have a speech later on, or comment I'll make later on, but I disagree with what you say. We won't agree a lot, Mr. Mayor, because I think you and I agree on a lot of things. There's only one issue that has driven this town apart since 2004 and 2015. And I've worked on that issue, and I promised the people I worked on that issue, and that's what I worked on. But we agree on a lot of things to make this town great, and it's a great town. It's a great town to live in, and it's a great town to bring new people into. And all we want to do, I think everyone on this council wants to do, is make it stay that way and ensure it stays a great town.
You know, Jeff, that's a great segue. Next item is discussion of the town should deliberate on regarding the one or more of the Copper Canyon Alliance election flyers.
I have a point of order.
Please.
I make a motion, since the mayor requested this item, which is clearly a politically biased discussion.
There's no action items, sir.
No, I'm making a motion to delete the item, sir. Just a minute. And be placed in the agenda for tonight's meeting. This sort of political discussion has no place in these council chambers and serves no function but to blur the lines between governing and politics. If a political discussion is to take place, then do it in an open free speech forum where ideas can be debated freely and without retribution. This is clearly an attempt at intimidation of freedom of speech by citizens. I make this motion to close this discussion at this time prior to any discussion on this topic, as it is a one-sided discussion.
Thank you, sir. Do you have a second on that motion? No. Motion dies for lack of a second, but I do agree. I agree with you 100%, sir. And that's the only thing, that's what I was going to say, is this type of stuff is harmful to our town. It hurts the town. It's just not healthy for our town. We're too small. Fundamentally, we all agree on the same thing. We want low density, large lots. We want public safety to the point we can afford it. We want to help the people who have drainage problems with their drainage problems. We want low taxes. We want good roads. That's what we do. That's all we do. And we all, fundamentally, we all agree on all of those things. But anonymous letters, anonymous cards are not healthy. I suggest, and I ask the council to consider, is that we hold a public forum. We hold a town hall meeting. This council will get on stage with whoever is involved in this And we'll discuss all of those items in an open, in a transparent situation, not behind something that's printed in Washington State by Vistaprint and GoDaddy.com. And we'll do it in an open session. That's what I'm asking. If whoever is responsible for it, I will ask Donna to call a special council meeting. We'll house the whole, we'll open up all the doors, invite everybody, and we will debate that. We'll get it out of the way before the next election. Council, I'm going to ask that this information be put into the records. This is the founders and the people who finance this organization. It's anonymous. I'm not going to read the names. I'll put it in public record. It's available to the public if they want to get it under an ORR. Councilmember Andrews, I think you had a comment. Did you want to make on this, or?
Yes, I would like to. I was going to talk to you about the drainage issue.
Oh, let's do that. I mean, if you don't want to make a comment, this can go on, but there's no action to take here. There's really no action to take here on this. I would ask that the council consider an open, transparent forum for these things to be discussed so we can answer to every one of them. You know, the one that says that the council's in my back pocket, etc. I really want to answer those. I want to stand up in a public forum. I want to talk. I want to answer to it. I don't want to hide behind a postcard.
Well, Mr. Mayor, can I make a comment then, please?
Please.
So by you exposing, if an individual wants to go, they're free to do it in the state of Texas and look for who was ever a member of that organization that's clearly stated in all the cards that have been printed. They clearly can do that, but I don't think it's right for the town to enter that into the minutes that you did the research and pulled it up. I think the individual, if they're interested, they should do it themselves.
Everybody's always wanting everything read into the minutes. This is part of the minutes. Councilmember Johnson, comments?
May I say something, Mayor?
Councilmember, go ahead.
I do have something to say. Online, there's a article written that's called, and there's copies over here, and I would invite you to get it, to read it if you haven't gone online. It's called the First Annual Copper Canyon State of the Town. And it's written by 3 mayors. The first mayor, Mr. Johnson, Sue Temmel, Ron Robertson. It outlines everything that's been going on, is what progress is made. And I too take an offense by the hate letter saying that I'm in the pocket of somebody. That's an accusation against my character. And I, pardon me, darn sure take offense to it. You can make it, but you better be able to prove it. What I've done wrong. And I take offense to that. It's an 84-year-old man, and I don't like it one bit. So I invite you to each one of you, pick up a copy of this and read this. And it's not about what I say, it's what somebody else says. And look at the condition of the town. So I'm addressing a couple of things in the face here together. So please do that. So we're on the table.
Thank you. Anybody else? Nope. Hearing none. Okay, go ahead.
Mayor,
go ahead, Rudy. Go ahead, Rudy.
I just want to add, having just run the election race, I had the opportunity to debate the other 2 candidates who were outstanding people. They were very nice, very cordial throughout the race. And I made a comment at the end of our forum that the threat to our town was not an external threat. The threat to our town is within the town. It is that kind of stuff where people that don't have the courage to identify themselves, yet they demand transparency from the council. We're always sitting up here. Everything we do is recorded. Everything we say is in the minutes of previous agendas. So I don't understand why some keyboard warrior decided to put up a website indicating all our flaws, saying we're in the pocket of the mayor, making baseless accusations, and just really ridiculous things. They can't even publish quotes that I said properly. The funny thing is, anybody who's in town, who's interested, can look at the videos and see, did Rudy really say that? And you may find out that I was misquoted, like so many other things in there, which are just wrong. This is all my opinion, but they're wrong. And frankly, it's cowardly to publish information under an identity that nobody can call you and go, hey, why are you saying this? And yet talk about not blurring the lines between government and politics. That's exactly what that does. It was a political stunt. And frankly, it's ridiculous. I do encourage everybody to find out who's behind this. It'll be entered into the record. And then we'll find out who has the courage to speak clearly, to stand for whatever it is that they want to say, and who wants to hide behind paperwork.
Mr. Mayor, I think your suggestion of a town hall is the proper way to address what was alleged. And I would hope at the next meeting that we can pick a date that works for that, and get to it. There were things in there that were beyond outrageous. I'm a corporate lawyer. I'm the chairman of a large company, and to accuse me of being in the pocket of the mayor, are you kidding me? It's simply unbelievable, but I'll look forward to seeing that proof and evidence. So if we can get that on the next meeting agenda.
We need to pick some dates in June, July, or August that works for a second meeting, and we'll just invite them. We have their email addresses, we have their names, we'll invite those people. And if they want to come, they can come, we'll be there.
And I would hope, again, since it would be a public forum, that there would be interested citizens and understanding.
Yes, I agree.
Mayor, if I could just jump in again, I was just sitting here thinking about some of the things that are stated on that website. One of the big emphasis items from an anonymous group was transparency that they were demanding from us. I think if we want to be totally transparent, why don't we read whatever documentation that is so that we know who we're talking about? It's been asked of us.
I would also like that.
The financiers of this group is Jeff Mayer of about $1,300, Nancy Henry of $300, and Ted Strandick of about $800, I believe, through the second report. Those are your three financiers.
Thank you.
And that's from the General Purpose Committee of Campaign Finance report. I believe I got this through the Texas Ethics Board. No.
This is the,
No, there's no illegal. I just think it's important that we be next item, the staff and mayor's report.
excuse me.
Time out, hold it. Officer, please, thank you. Please take an order, make order, please. Order. The next item is staff and mayor's report. Any item to report on tonight, council, we remind you that Shred Day is Saturday, May 14th at 8 o'clock to noon for Shred Day.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a couple of community interest items.
Okay.
The first item I want to talk about is I attended the annual Cross Timbers Water meeting last month as the only council member at the meeting, which was of course a voluntary thing to show up. I can report that staff at that for Cross Timbers Water reports that they are in well position to provide enough water for our town, giving our growth and around the surrounding areas for the immediate future. And that's always been a contention with how much water we're going to need in the future. I also attended the following quarterly meeting, which was discussed about the updating of their water out, and they were discussing updating of their water outage notification system. And I've been on that, asking them to update their notification system for the last few months. And it was reported by them that their computer system programming is working its way through its system to make sure they can access emails and phone numbers, cell phones, for outage notifications in your areas. And the reason I'm bringing this up, I'm just reminding everybody, please go on your Cross Timbers water profile in the settings and make sure you have your email in there and a proper cell phone notification. That way they'll stop doing the robocall system and they'll start doing texting and emailing you for notifications so that you'll be able to get it better because nobody pays attention to the robocalls. So everyone just make sure you update your system, your profile in those systems. The next item I'd like to talk about community interest, as has been mentioned, is this is my last council meeting. And as was done in the previous last year, the councilman didn't get to say anything when they left. I'm saying something now for community interest. And I want to thank a lot of people. First, I want to thank my wife. She's put up with a lot of shit. She's put up with sleepless nights where I battle trying to find solutions for problems people come to me with. When I drive around this town and people give me problems, and I have never seen anybody else driving around this town, and they tell me they've never seen another councilman. In fact, the guy that I beat, he came to my house to take my picture. That picture on that wall right now. He came to my house, took my picture, and you know what his words were to me? He said he had never been in Chin Chapel North, and he'd been on the council for 12 years. That is disgusting. I wasn't going to go this direction, but I'm having to now. Okay? Now I'm going to say that. So I want to say thank you, honey, for all the sleepless nights and all the time that I took away from you. And Roger, my dog. I want to say thank you to trusted advisors who helped me learn this job as being a councilman. Nancy Henry, Ted and Judy Strancic, Robin, Vicky, and Vic. All of you have given me their advice and guidance to make me have decisions to help our town. They were given under the auspices to keep this town as a large rural country community, which we fought ever since 2004. I also want to say thanks to the people I've met who've become my friends as I drove around this town, stopping my truck, car, chatting with people in their yards and knocking on their doors. Allow me to know what they hear from them, what they hear and what they think is important. I know the citizens of Copper Canyon want to keep our country lifestyle, and that wish is the one issue I have tried to keep forefront when I take this chair. The people who live in this town have always been wonderful to talk to and listen to. I'll miss that. Be taking a break from those conversations for a while. The one thing I won't miss is the few people who have come to believe their will is more important than that of the people's. That's all I got to say on community interest.
Thank you, sir. Staff, anything to report? Nope. Okay. Consent agenda. Any item on the consent agenda may be removed by any member of council for individual discussion or consideration. Approval of the April 11th minutes, approval of the April 2022 financials, and approval of a resolution of 22 to nominate Jim Carter, Danko 911 board manager.
I'd like to make a correction to the minutes for the April 11th, 2022 minutes, please.
Okay.
That correction I'd like to make is the accusation from Mr. Foster. I'd like to add the word to alleged that an acting council member unfairly treated his family instead of the words that are written as today.
Okay.
Sheila, you wrote the minutes, or the minutes that you wrote, or do you feel are accurate, or any changes need to be made? Those changes are fine? Okay, thank you. Is that it, sir?
That's fine.
Thank you. All right, council, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda with the changes of the April 11th, 2022 as stated by Councilmember Mayor and agreed to by the town secretary. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda by Councilmember Andrews. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Deputy Mayor Pro Tem. All in favor?
Aye.
Yay.
A unanimous motion carries. Next item is flood management strategy presentation. Councilmember Andrews first, I believe, has some comments. And then we'll go to you and Chris. Mandy, we'll go to Mandy and Chris after Dale has a few comments.
You know, when I took this job in this part of the being a councilman, I was asked to do work in the drainage and the bridge section. I did bring and do bring some limited expertise to that area. And so with that knowledge, I have gone with Chris on several times here. And I'll speak to him as Chris, he's our town engineer. And through this, we've kind of been down some ditches and under the bridges and under the culverts and looking around and trying to figure out what we can do. And with the limited funds we have here, what's available for us to do. And so on April 21st, he and I and his cohort, let me get the name right. I did have it written down here. Anyway, he's a bridge engineer. We met out on the States Lane Drive to inspect the bridge there at the end of the street. And as well as we talked about the culvert, which has always been in question up there on the States. And while we're there, as we met there in different cars, we drove up, we're looking around and different people would drive by. One, Allison Hunt, came by, it's her car, so she stopped and talked a moment, just a few moments. And it was really interacting with the community there as we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, looking at the bridge. We had reports that if you could just imagine, there's an upstream and a downstream to any culvert, bridge, whatever, water goes one way. Sometime in north, sometime in south. In this case, the water runs from the south to the north in that area on that bridge. Well, underneath it, there was being some undercut, and I don't want to get too technical, but it's kind of the reason we're out there looking at the condition of the bridge. And that bridge is pretty old. I don't know what year, we never did figure out what year it was built. There's no markings on it, so we don't, but it's been there a while. But the bridge basically is sound. It was designed right, built right, and it's holding up right. Now, there are some issues, but not the structure of the bridge per se. What happens is, over a period of time, is that debris, limbs, trash floats down from wherever they come from. And as that one will go in there and suspension will fall out and they'll lay there, and the next one will lay there on top of that, and the next one. Over the years, things build up. So what happens is you have two vents, is what they call these structures, bridge with two openings in it. One of them builds up, and I'm getting a little technical, but just envision what we're doing here. And we're looking to see why all the water basically is going out of one vent, pretty much till the water gets real high. Then it tries to go over the trash pile out there. So all these limbs and logs and things have just washed down the creek in lots there, which creates all this rushing of water out one vent. Well, that's undercutting the bridge slab underneath there to some degree. And that was one of the major things we were looking at there. And also how the water comes shooting out of there at one angle and bounces off the wall here and goes there. Well, anyway, so while we're there, another neighbor drives, comes over and talks to us. And it's quite interesting to hear him because he's talking about his house had water lapping up there close to the foundation of the house and all this, but he hadn't been flooded. So the idea was to remove the logs and the trash on the second vent to open it up so it could freely go more water. So anyway, that's what, but we talked to the Sandifords. He had an issue down on the end of the block. We walked down to his house, drove down there and looked at his problem. And his too was on his own private property. We can't do anything, but the engineer, and I was willing to talk to him. So when we walked up, we saw immediately what his problem was. And you know what it was? It's grass clippings, mostly, because he just mows his yard. And sometimes your thatch in your yard builds up. It changes the direction of the water and carrying the debris. So now then, instead of kind of following a channel that was there originally, now it's jumping in that channel and tried to head for his garage. Well, a little maintenance work on his behalf, he was glad we pointed this out to him. So this is what we've been doing quietly behind the scenes, doing these different things. Butch Malaman called, and I never met the gentleman. So I went out to visit him at his house on Estates Lane. He's concerned about the culvert there. And it's bent down. It's a culvert that's been there for a long, long time. It may be undersized to some degree, but the thing had been bent down where somebody had run over it with a tractor or something. And so logs and stuff, again, that it jumps the road and takes off. Well, I must say this, and I'm happy to say that that one there is a subject of being changed out and putting in 2 concrete box culverts to alleviate that whole flooding in that area there on that one road. We can work within the roadways. It's hard to jump back on people's private property and do things. My heart goes out to the Hunts and different ones. They got issues. But anyway, we're trying to work through some issues. I just want to give you kind of a really in-depth, thorough. Now he's going to talk about the other stuff, but this is stuff that I'm really passionate about and trying to work through.
Thank you. Mandy, I think you want to get up. You were trying to get up there.
I was really anxious. So good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Mandy Clark. I'm with Tignall and Perkins, and we've been working on the flood management strategy. For anybody in the audience that didn't get a copy of the presentation, there may be a few more copies, and I probably didn't have enough for everybody, but if you would share, that'd be great if you're interested. We've printed the presentation, so I'll try to say the slide numbers as we go. But if I miss one, please just holler out and let me know. Again, I'm Mandy Clark. I'm the Director of Water Resources for Tignall and Perkins. I work with Chris Hartke, your city engineer, and the project manager for the Poindexter study and this project is Jared Horst. So I'm moving to slide 3. So in 2020, we had a contract with you, and it really had 2 components. One component was the Poindexter branch drainage study. And I came and I talked to you back in August and went through the details of that study. And now we're to the second part, and hopefully we're finishing this contract out and able to move on to the next thing, is the flood management strategy. So what is the flood management strategy? I'm moving to slide 5. It has, a couple of purposes. One is the Water Development Board is working through regional flood planning guidelines. And so they haven't established them yet, but they've given some guidance of elements that should be included in flood planning documents. And so we want to coordinate with that because that will give you a better footing when you do apply for grants and funding and that sort of thing. And the second point is to provide some practical guidance for the council, the staff, and the residents, and provide a roadmap for how you're going to handle your drainage in the future. Because I guess if there's one thing I've heard sitting here, well, I've heard several things, but one thing I heard is that drainage is a big concern in the community. So the contents of the flood management strategy are looking at potential problems and projects. And those can be either floodplain related, which are associated with a creek and people who live adjacent to a creek, but they can also be localized. As Council Member Andrews talked about, a lot of people have problems with grading on their lot or just something they've done to change the pattern of drainage. And that can be just as big a problem, if not bigger, than a creek problem, depending on what it is. And then talking about some routine practices that the town and their contractors can do to just try to head off future problems. Looking at your ordinances and regulations and how you could adopt different things to address the drainage issues, and then an action plan for the future. So I'm gonna, so the first thing I talked about in the problems is what's the difference between floodplain related problems and localized problems. And like I said, floodplain related problems are associated with creek drainage. So it's your Poindexter branch and its tributaries primarily. And then the localized drainage problems are related to either infrastructure inadequacies, and that could be your street and bar ditch section. It could be culverts, either driveway culverts or crossroad culverts, or inlets and pipes. Y'all don't have many inlets and pipes because most of your development is more rural, but you do have the development south of 407. So you're going to probably see some inlets and pipes in your system. And then the lot-to-lot drainage issues that you referred to earlier as well, which can be a big challenge because the city doesn't necessarily have the authority or funding to address people's private property issues. And that's when we can help people by meeting with them and giving them guidance like y'all did the other day. So, so I'm going to talk about each of these things, and if y'all feel free to stop me if I'd rather have a conversation at the time or whatever you want to do, whatever you're comfortable with. But talking about the floodplain related concerns first, and I'm on slide 9 now. The scope of the Poindexter branch study was we updated the existing floodplain models. And then we also looked at the ultimate fully developed floodplain model. So once your city develops 100%, once you're at build out, what does that floodplain look like? Because a lot of cities will regulate to the ultimate flood condition because your water surfaces are higher once you're built out. We identified flood hazards to properties, structures, and bridges. We evaluated the bridge capacities, identified some improvement alternatives, and evaluated some creek erosion. And I did present all of this at the August, I believe it's August 9th. That might not be quite, it was the first meeting in August of last year. So one of the interesting things, normally when we do update floodplain maps, most of the time we see more homes being coming into the floodplain. But the Poindexter branch study showed there were currently 9 homes within the FEMA floodplain limits. And now there are 3. So 6 homes were removed from the floodplain limits from the study. Now we haven't officially changed the map or anything, but the study shows that 6 homes were removed. So that was some good news.
Just because you changed the map.
Yes.
None of the homes left.
No, none of the homes left. It's a mapping exercise where before the floodplain in this area was this wide and now it's this wide, and it pulled the homes out. So it's unusual and nice. And then we looked at bridge capacities. And so there are some issues there. So we looked at 4 different bridges over Poindexter branch. We looked at the Meadow Bridge, the railroad culverts, the Estates Bridge that Councilman Andrews mentioned earlier, and then the Chin Chapel Bridge. And so good news is Chin Chapel passes the 100-year event. It does not meet the city's standard of 100 years plus 2 foot of freeboard, but I think you take what you can get when you don't have good capacity. The Meadow Bridge had a 10-year capacity. The railroad bridge is more of a backwater situation, so it's not really applicable to say what year event it'll pass. And then the Estates Bridge passes the 2-year event. And so the concern with the Meadow and the Estates bridges is that when they are overtopped, you do have some homes that might be isolated from emergency services during those times. And also there's a hazard to the traveling public. So we did look at 6 different alternatives. So I'm on slide 12 now. And you can see just kind of the blend. Most of this, the first 4 alternatives were bridge reconstructions of various permutations. So the first two were Meadow Estates and Chin Chapel. Alternate one contemplated buyouts of the remaining homes that would be in the floodplain. Alternative two contemplated doing channel grading to eliminate the need to buy out homes. Alternatives 3 and 4 looked at the railroad bridge reconstruction. That's a very expensive and typically very long-term issue to address railroad reconstruction. But we also looked at those two alternatives, and 3 included the buyouts. And there were more buyouts because when you open up that railroad bridge, it raises some water surfaces and puts some more homes in the floodplain. So there were more buyouts, or the channel grading, which would eliminate the need for the buyouts. Alternative 5 was the detention option. And so we were looking at potentially a detention pond. I'll just point kind of to this area. And if we had built a 45-acre pond, you could eliminate the flooding of the bridges and the homes. And then alternative 6 was just strict buyouts of the 3 remaining homes that were in the floodplain. So we didn't discuss a selection. Those were just the alternatives that were considered. And then we looked at erosion a little bit. We didn't do a full-blown, erosion assessment of every foot of the creek, but we looked at velocities along the creek. We looked at erosion at the bridges. There is some erosion at the Estates Bridge, and then also at the Chin Chapel Bridge. So depending what was selected, if an alternative was selected for either of those, we could address that. And then there were a couple of locations where there were homes that were looking a little close to the path of the creek, and the velocities in the area would indicate some erosive velocities. So the potential next steps from the Poindexter study would be selecting an alternative. And I think that would probably, we discussed with Donna and Sheila the other day to do maybe a work session or something to talk through those in a little bit more detail. A letter of map revision, which would officially change the maps. And I'll talk a little bit about the benefits of that in a minute. There could be some alternatives for individual homeowners to do some map changes as well. An erosion policy discussion. Anytime you're solving erosion on private property, it can get a little tricky because you need to have a good, well-defined way to prioritize what problems you're solving. Looking at reaches of the creek versus spot repair. Spot repair can often cause more problems than it solves as erosion moves upstream and downstream from it. And then establishing a drainage capital improvement program. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Are there any questions about this section of the presentation of the Poindexter study?
Very helpful, actually.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the localized drainage concerns. So we did post a survey. I'm on slide 16. We posted a survey on the town's website from January 6th through February 28th, and we received 29 responses. We've provided the detailed responses to the town staff and provided a summary in the flood management strategy in the spirit of not having names and contact information and details of drainage problems, but it's out there. And then, so the survey questions included contact information, concern location, the type of flooding that was being experienced. Was it home flooding, yard flooding, erosion, street flooding, standing water in the ditches, or flooding from the creek? When the flooding occurred, what dates or approximate dates or how often? And then was the flooding related to Poindexter branch? We only received one comment related to the maps on Poindexter. We also provided copies of the Poindexter floodplain maps, and we only received one comment. It was just a clarification, so we didn't really receive much there. So I'm on slide 17. So this map shows the sources, or categories of the flooding. So 10 of the 29 responses were related to ditches, culverts, and roads. So your public infrastructure type issues. And on the map, the yellow highlighted areas were the general areas that those issues were experienced. We had 3 lot-to-lot issues, and on the map, the light blue circles were areas where lot-to-lot issues were identified. We had 6 concerns along Poindexter Branch, 6 concerns along the tributaries, which are the orange lines, and Poindexter Branch is the green. We had a couple of, we just need to maybe reach back out to the homeowner and get a little bit more clarification. It was a little vague. And then we had a couple of duplicate or informational comments. And so on slide 18, the ditches and the culverts and the roads, that's typically due to maybe the ditches have become silted in or the culverts have become silted in. Maybe there's an issue where the road slope is flat and the water just can't get out fast enough. It could be various issues. The lot-to-lot issues, this little image here is if in a perfect world, every lot would drain from back to front. It would go around in swales, but we all know that, things are rarely perfect. And in a town like Copper Canyon, where you have encouraged the large lots, that's a blessing because there's a lot more room to get flow around. But sometimes it also means that when the area was designed, people thought, hey, there's plenty of room. And so there wasn't maybe good design done or good lot grading done. And people also build things either on their own property or a neighbor builds something, and it can cause issues as well. And then the Poindexter Branch issues. And then the tributaries. And as I said, if you look at that little map above, the orange lines were the tributaries, and we did not study those as a part of the Poindexter Branch study. So slide 19, potential next steps would be to, as a part of the master drainage study that I'm going to talk about, evaluate those roadway issues, culvert issues, ditch issues, and identify some conceptual solutions to help those folks in those areas. Study those tributaries that we didn't study, and then have a discussion with council regarding an erosion policy, how you would like to handle that, and go from there, because that's a tricky subject. So that's kind of the more objective part of the study is identifying the problems or the flood management strategy. And then there's some guidance for routine creek maintenance, because I think in a town with a lot of bar ditches, most people know that water isn't treated. But in some cities, people think if they dump something in the storm drain inlet, it may go to a treatment plant, and it does not. It all goes straight to the creek, and whatever you dump there can impact what happens in the creek. So the flood management strategy includes what signs of a healthy creek, signs of an unhealthy creek. I'm not going to read each of these things, but you want to see clear flowing water and some wildlife. That usually indicates that it's healthy. Unhealthy is, muddy, lots of erosion, stagnant water and trash. And then some best practices, some kind of do's and don'ts for citizens and maybe the town's contractors.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Real quick, sorry. Sheila, is this going out on the internet too? They can see these slides? Do we have this? Because I see the screen's blank up there. Can people see the slides? No. They can't. Okay, all right. So I was just going to clear up the slide 22. That's not in our.
No, it is not in
It's
your
just
town. That's
representates-
just
okay.
an ugly creek.
An ugly creek. All right. Good.
And
It's
the
not in
nice
our
one
town.
isn't in your town either, unfortunately. But they're just examples. But one of the things that, one of the reasons that this information is provided is it could be used for the town to provide outreach to the citizens, either through flyers or the website or social media, to do some do's and don'ts if you have a week or a month of, hey, we're going to just give some helpful information. So that's out there. And I believe, once this is accepted, it would likely be on your website as well. And then the routine maintenance inspection. So we are your consultant that provides your permitting reports for the TCEQ, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality annual stormwater reports. And so we inspect your pipe outfalls as part of that permit every year. And if we see something unusual, we'll point it out and point it out to your attention and have somebody clean it. But we're not really inspecting the ditches. We're not inspecting all the driveway culverts. It's just the roadway culverts. Typically your bar ditch maintenance is the property owner's responsibility, of the homeowner, the home that fronts it. But what happens when that ditch silts in, or somebody just doesn't maintain it to the same standard that their neighbor maintains it? It causes upstream and downstream problems. And so that can be an issue. So keeping an eye on that and providing some good guidance for homeowners is important. Also, there's some areas where it may be difficult or unlikely that a homeowner would maintain it. I'm thinking maybe homes that back onto other roadways, maybe along Chin Chapel or some of the major roads where homes back up to them or side them. It might be good to establish just a periodic inspection program, maintenance program to check those areas as well. So I'm on slide 25. Also individual property owner solutions. So it's always nice when somebody has a problem and tries to address it on their own, but erosion can be tricky. So just some guidance is if people were to see some erosion starting on their property, the earlier it's addressed, the better. And sometimes it can be fixed with just planting some real well-rooted ground covers and grasses, native plantings, non-invasive. I think sometimes people will plant something as a screen, such as bamboo, and that can just go crazy, and that's a problem. So just things that are easy to control and have nice deep roots. Removing trash and just overgrown vegetation where you can. Trees, if you see a tree that's leaning and is about to fall in, if it's a goner anyway, it's good to just cut it off at the roots so that the weight of the tree doesn't pull those roots out and cause more erosion. And if a homeowner wants to make major or hard solution improvements, consult an engineer, talk to the floodplain administrator before doing that, because sometimes that can cause more harm than good. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So ordinances and regulations. I'm on slide 27 now. Overall, the ordinances are fairly current and look to be in generally good shape. Your flood hazard ordinance meets FEMA's model ordinance. It looks very similar to almost every other flood hazard ordinance you will see. It was done in 2010. A couple of things you might consider is you have a minimum finished floor elevation that's 2 foot above the FEMA flood elevation, which is existing conditions. Many cities will say 2 foot above the fully developed. So that's something, if you were to look at your ordinance, you might consider doing that. But 2 foot above the base flood elevation is conservative as well. There isn't a specific floodway section to tell people to keep out of the main channel of the creek. Your appeals process goes to the ZBA versus the council, which is fine. But many towns, the ZBA doesn't meet very often. So that might be something to consider, changing that to a board that meets more frequently and is more familiar with floodplain issues. And then I wasn't able to find a penalties section. The flood hazard ordinance is part of the building regulations. And so it might be good to clarify that penalties section. I didn't see anything in the subdivision ordinance that really even discussed, floodplain issues, and that's fine. You do refer in the engineering design manual, you refer to the ISWIM, which is Integrated Stormwater Management, which is a council of governments a model ordinance that many cities use. But the Design Standards Manual has copied and pasted from the ISWIM. It might be better to refer to ISWIM so that as it's updated, it's just automatically updated in your ordinance. And then your zoning ordinance has some low impact design recommendations. Low impact design is using methods that mimic the natural environment. So permeable pavement, swales that absorb the water, ditches that absorb the water, kind of hold it for a bit and absorb it before sending it on its way to filter it, cisterns, rain barrels, things like that. If that's important, it might be good to flesh that out a little bit, but otherwise everything looked good. So none of these are real big issues. So the action plan that's included in the flood hazard or flood management strategy. So the master drainage study and plan, I'm going to talk about each of these in turn. A drainage capital improvement program, Poindexter branch letter of map revision, and a stormwater utility fee analysis. So I'm on slide 30. So the master drainage study would just sort of take in the tributary study and the localized drainage concerns and allow us to really dig into those localized concerns and give you some conceptual alternatives. So go out and meet with the people that are having some drainage issues and gathering that information, because there could be plenty of people that are having issues. You just need to target them a little bit more and get that information. And then the tributaries, and this was partially funded. I believe you have funding available already for part of this. And this would serve as the background for your capital improvement program development. And then also we would include an erosion policy and a detailed evaluation at the council's pleasure. So on slide 31, the master drainage study would be the basis for the CIP. So the capital improvement program typically is 5 years in most cities. You could go up to 10. And it usually the first year is your capital budget. So this example, so in your capital budget year, if you started in 23, you'd have those A, B, C, and D funding for construction and design. And this is very, very just an example. And then some routine maintenance funding, and that would be the budget, and the others would be preliminary. So then during 2023, you would also be refining your estimates for 2024 and locking those down to establish your 2024 budget, and then having a preliminary budget for out years after that. So that's generally what that would look like. And it would be, we would use the master drainage study to identify those projects and establish that program. And then the letter of map revision for Poindexter, the image that you see there is the letter of map revision that was done in Lantana. So that's what it would look like if you just translated that over to the Poindexter side. It would give more information. You would have established flood elevations along Poindexter for your citizens to see. So the benefits of doing the letter of map revision are that it reduces or eliminates flood insurance for those homes that are removed from the floodplain. And it also provides, it remaps and provides current information for your residents and anyone that wanted to build something in your town. Now we talked a little bit about could individual, like if you chose not to do the letter of map revision, because it's not required. But the individual property owners could use the information to get their own letter of map amendment, but it wouldn't change the maps, but it would help them with their insurance. Probably cost-wise, overall, it would be about the same. It would just be, how you fund it.
I have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So if you do the future council does a letter of map revision and changes and shrinks down the map area, it takes houses out of the flood zone.
Mm-hmm.
And that house floods. Are we culpable for that?
I don't believe so. They would still be able to, we can look into that.
The ISO rating is going to go down from the insurance, so that's the only thing that's going to affect is their insurance. It won't affect the town whatsoever. It'd be their insurance.
They would their insurance come after us for saying, hey, you took us out of the flood zone. We lowered their rate. I'm just saying something for you to consider. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to know that.
Work session for the attorney. It's an actual question.
Yeah, we can absolutely.
If the town does it, it takes the onus off of the citizens to do it individually.
Right.
That's what I'm in favor, right, the town.
As long as we're not culpable.
Right, gotcha.
I thought I had something to say.
Oh, you're good.
Okay.
You take a question from the audience?
Oh, sure. Yes, sir.
Is that okay, Mr. Mayor?
Let her finish her presentation first. Let me get this
Okay.
presentation out.
I'm close. And then 33, we looked at the stormwater utility fee. So many cities in the Metroplex have a stormwater utility fee. So that's a fee that's assessed to the property owners that funds all of these things we've been talking about. It could fund the whole stormwater management program. And the fee is based on the property's impact to the stormwater system. So for instance, a home on a single lot does not contribute as much in stormwater as an industrial facility. So it's based on that impervious lot coverage. It can be used for maintenance activities, so ditch cleaning, bridge repairs, stormwater quality programs, stormwater management projects, drainage projects, or flood studies and planning documents like the ones we've done here. It is typically on the property owner's utility bill. And it's usually based on equivalent residential unit, which would be sized as like the average home in your community. And it could either be every homeowner in the city pays the same flat rate, or it's tiered based on the home size. So, maybe this is very arbitrary, but maybe a 2,000 square foot house pays $4, a 3,000 square foot house pays $5, and a 4,000 and above pays $6, or something like that. It can vary. And then on commercial, it is based on how much impervious area they have on the ground. So currently I'm on 34 now. There are about 985 lots on the ground in Copper Canyon. The average fees around the Metroplex are around $5. So I did a little bit of just projection of if, a home paid $3 a month, what does that generate? 35,000 up to $10, which would be, about double the average rate. It would generate about 118,000 for the town. Then if you go to build out, the comprehensive plan said that at build out, you'll have about 1,985 lots, or around 2,000 lots. And then you also have the town center coming online. So at full build out, you have every lot built in town, and you have your town center. It's there at the corner of Copper Canyon and 407. You could, if at the $3, it'd be about 80,000, and at $10, it'd be about 264. So, with that comes a lot of, administration. So billing, you'd either need a contract or do your own billing. And just keeping up with it, ensuring that, questions are answered. It's audited properly. There are some issues there, but we can certainly look into it. This is just to give you an idea of the order of magnitude. In order to do it, we would need to do a full study, get actual data, and do, an actual study. So with that, that concludes my presentation. I've got our contact information at the back. If you have any questions, want to give us a call or an email, happy to answer any questions. And
Ted, did you have a question since you brought this?
I just got my flood insurance new bill. It went up 27%. And the deductible went up 10%. I'm sure other people are being affected in the same fashion. Is there specific issues in here that would get FEMA to lower some of our rates? What could we do?
are you in the floodplain, or you just have a preferred risk policy? But do you know if you're in the actual FEMA floodplain? Are you in the actual FEMA floodplain?
No, I am not.
Okay, so what they are doing is they are starting to move everybody from, whether you're in the FEMA floodplain or not, if you're paying flood insurance, they're putting you on their same rate. there's a lot of subsidy involved with flood insurance and they're trying to make it up in any way they can. It is.
It doesn't matter whether you're the floodplain or not, you're still gonna be saying right.
You could, yes. That's what we're hearing at all the conferences right now, that they're moving towards that. Now, anybody in the room can have flood insurance.
All right,
And it
okay.
used to be that your policy in the floodplain was higher. I think they're moving to everybody's kind of equally.
All right. We're not done with this. We're going to visit this some more in June or July.
Okay.
And, there's mechanisms out there, but nothing close to what this is going to cost the town. Actually, the county's holding a bond election in November. I've asked Donna, you have information on I've asked Donna to look into that. Okay. And I've asked that we jump in on that bond election if possible for just flood damage. And if the county's going to look at that. So we're going to try to jump in on that for whatever we can, which I know Donna spoke to you about that. And that was at a mayor's meeting I was at last week or the week before last. And so that came up. So we're going to try to take advantage of that as much as we can. But it'd be a county-wide bond election, roads, bridges, drainage, multiple things for the county. So, yes.
It was mentioned about hiring grants, someone to do grants, I looked into grants. I usually don't say anything about what the staff does, but I think that with a comment you need to know, I've been grants for 30 years. In the past 8 or 9 years, we've received with a current grant, over $500,000. We've done windows in the building, we've done computers for the council, a lot of different things. The latest grant I worked on was a federal grant that we had received for $384,000 for drainage. We've already gotten $189,000 in our bank account. We'll get the other 50% in the fall. So we are working on that and going for the grants that general law type A cities can go for. Anything that's out there, and if you've ever worked on a federal grant, it's no picnic. Well, we can get the funds, or we get the funds a few months ago.
Yeah. Thank you, Donna. Well done, by the way.
Oh, I have one more.
Okay.
It was mentioned, the detention on where it crosses Copper Canyon Road. The only thing we looked at the time, I visited with Encore. There's a huge Encore easement there. It wasn't private property or anything. It was non-Encore easement. That's the only place we mentioned to them about a detention pond.
No private property involved. Right. Okay. Council, any other questions for our consultant? Not, we'll move on.
Thank you.
Chris, you had anything to add, or she did a good job for you? Okay. All right, let's get down to business here. Next item of business is public hearing. Anyone is allowed to speak in favor or opposition. The first item is opening the public hearing for approving an exemption for accessory building ordinances, Chapter 14, zoning ordinance, Exhibit A, Article A, Section 4-104, Copper Canyon, Texas. This is a public hearing. Anyone may speak in favor or opposition at this time. Anybody like to speak in favor or opposition of the accessory building ordinance? Please come to the podium, state your name. And it's the same time limit applies to 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Nancy Henry, 761 Lonesome Dove Lane. As I understand it, anybody has 1 acre, they don't have an appeal. Only 2 acres or more. Is that correct?
That would be correct, yes.
I would think that they should have the same advantage as everybody else.
Your appeal process would be through the BOA.
Okay.
But it'd have to be proven hardship if that was the case.
Because I know they had a different size before and then they cut it down. And to me, it's like having the have and the have-nots, and I think everybody should be treated the same.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is that your comments?
yeah,
All right, thank you.
thank you.
Someone else? Please come to the podium.
I just have a question on the address, the 800 Copper Canyon Ranch Road.
Okay.
Those are two different roads. So which is it, Copper Canyon Road or Ranch Road? Behind George, that road? Okay, all right.
Thank you. All right, this is a public hearing in favor or opposition of accessory buildings. Anybody else to speak? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing.
Did you enter the record, sorry, Mr. Mayor, did you enter the record George's comment?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
okay, did you, more than what was earlier? Okay, go ahead. Got you, go ahead. I'm sorry, I'll open the public hearing back up and go back to the Donna.
Mr. Nicholas has always been a good steward of that land and a good neighbor. I do not believe the additional building will detract from the neighborhood. The new structure could just as easily been designed as an addition to the existing major building, and then we would not be discussing the issue tonight.
Thank you. All right, now we'll close the public hearing and I will go to the next public hearing. Is amending Article 4 supplementary provisions of Chapter 14 of the Code of Ordinance of the Town of Copper Canyon, Texas on Exhibit A zoning ordinance, providing for a number of accessory structures on lots less than 2 acres, more than 5, and more than 10 acres, providing that the use is a major accessory building as inhabited space under the certain conditions, providing for special exemptions of major accessory buildings under unique circumstances, and providing an allowance for property owners who own 2 contiguous properties to determine acreage for use of accessory building. This is a public hearing. Anyone here that would like to speak in favor or opposition? Okay, Mr. Bueller again. Okay.
I would ask for a small revision to the new section 4-104 dealing with accessory buildings. Under the proposed new section 4104 for R1 lots, an accessory building can only be located in the rear yard. Previously, an accessory building could be located in the side yard, assuming it met setback requirements and the side yard did not face the street. My home is within 70 feet of my rear property line with a 15-foot setback that leaves 55 feet from the rear of the home to the back of the accessory building. Assuming a typical accessory building is at least 10 by 15 feet, the front of the accessory building could be as close as 40 feet to the back of the residence. This is not a particularly attractive option. Basically, this would preclude anyone with a home that is set deep in their lot from having an accessory building. I would ask that the ordinance be revised to allow for accessory buildings in side yards, as was previously the case. If they otherwise meet the 15-foot side yard setback requirement and the side yard did not face the street, or some other workable solution so that residents with 1 acre lots and a deep placement of their home on the lot not be prevented from having an accessory building. And then I have one more. This is from Lynn and Cindy Jensen, 905 Hillside. We are a 25-year residents and are the owners of a 1 acre property in the Woodland section of Copper Canyon. We are 100% supportive of the proposed amendments to the accessory building code being presented today. We are specifically in favor of the code revisions that are referenced for properties on less than 2 acres, which apply to our area. The 1,200 square foot limit for a major building is a much needed change. A limit of 1 major and 1 minor building is more than adequate for these properties. Allowing habitable buildings to be constructed on the same materials as the primary residence is crucial. No metal or mismatched building should be allowed for this purpose. It's obvious that much time and effort was made to develop these amended codes, which are flexible and appropriate for the various property sizes of Copper Canyon. We are in 100% approval of the proposed amendments to the accessory building code. Respectfully, Glenn and Cindy Jensen.
Thank you. Okay. Anyone else speak in favor or opposition? Well, public, you want to speak under the public hearing? You want to wait till we get to the, I'm going to call on you on the agenda item. That way, all right. With that, I'll close the public hearing and we will go to the next agenda item. First action and discussion item is discussion and consideration taking action regarding approving an exception from the accessory building ordinance, chapter 14, zoning, exhibit A, article section 4-104, Copper Canyon. You want to? Okay, nothing on that. Okay, so this is the one at 800 Copper Canyon Ranch Road that you just heard about. Council, any discussion? No questions from council?
I do have a question. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. My question, and you represented the owner, right? I forgot your name.
My name is Greg.
Greg, thank you, Greg. And George has no problem with the building and stuff like that and everything, as long as it's not going to be reused for any business or any kind of commercial product, just storage, hobby area, that kind of thing. I mean, because we have that restriction in our town.
Yeah, so it would be the same material and same color as the one that was built years ago. So it would maybe be the larger one of the two. The smaller one is, I don't know how, the old red barn.
Yeah.
So it's in close proximity. We were in 40 plus acres. And
Yeah.
We were on 5 acre tract. You could have 16 buildings on this piece of property. We're asking for a third.
Sure.
Yeah. And we just think that the size of the property should allow that.
All right, thank you, sir. Any other questions? Not, Chair, entertain a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve as a building.
I have a motion by Councilmember Mayor. Do I have a second? To approve.
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous, motion carries. Next item is discussion and consideration of taking action regarding recommendations from the Copper Canyon Planning and Zoning Commission regarding the Williams Ants Ranch preliminary plat on 20.09 acres in the Williams Bias Survey Abstract number 120, town of Copper Canyon, Denton County, Texas. Council, this is a preliminary plat. It's not 100% complete. I think Chris would have had some things for them yet to do. Those things must be complete before it comes back for a final plat. Comments, council?
Mayor, just if I could, so you're referring to the red ink that's in the TMP document?
Yes.
All those things will be addressed
by final plat.
Yes, that's correct. They originally wanted to come in with both preliminary and final together. And then as we kind of got to a time crunch, there were still several items. So they backed off the final plat and just wanted to do a preliminary plat.
No issues with that, Mayor?
No, I have no, that's very typical. If the applicant can do preliminary and final, they have to complete all the concerns of engineering and staff. If they cannot, that must be a preliminary, and then another meeting would be the final. And that's when everything has to be answered. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have a question. And Chris, maybe you can answer it. Mr. Siciliano, maybe you can answer it, sir. The question concerns the overall water plan map on C-04, C4-14, and C4-22. The last 3 maps that we have from the preliminary. And my question is, it shows the stormwater flow away from 407 up to the detention pond in the northwest corner there. And I'm trying to understand the diagram. Where is, when that pond gets full, where's the water going to flow to when it's still raining?
Would you, Chris, could you answer those?
So you're talking about the one at the northwest corner, correct?
Yes. Well, my understanding from the maps, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this storm plan, overall stormwater plan on C4-14. I assume that's the map number because that's the only thing that changes on this.
No, that's correct.
It flows to the north to that detention pond up there. right? Which borders on other person's properties. My concern, my question is, once that detention pond gets full of water, where is the exit valve? Where is the water flow to?
So the overflow goes to the northeast. It follows the existing drainage pattern, and if it gets over the required detained water level, then that's where it'll outfall to.
This is purely a gravity feed flow operation, right?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay. So that means that water is going to flow onto Jeannie Shackelford's property to the north.
Yep.
Where it's going right now.
Well, the issue though, for me. Oh, goes Oxy, so it doesn't go north.
Jeannie is north.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but that's the issue that I have, that I'm concerned with, is the consideration that today that's open terrain, right?
Right.
The whole 20 acres doesn't flood up to that detention pond.
Right.
So in the future, when we build this thing, all 20 acres of stormwater is going to flood up to that detention pond, right? Via the stormwater.
Which is designed to do. This would be a cataclysmic event where it overflowed. Aren't we designed to help have 100-year flood water
Correct.
flow in there?
Okay, is that what it is, 100
Yeah.
foot?
Yeah.
I just don't want her property being flooded by water that we're forcing onto her property from the entire 20 acres.
No, that's not happening.
Yep, and then one of the other issues as we move towards final is where they're showing that outfall, that's gonna get pulled back. So it'll come to more of a sheet flow before it actually leaves the property. So it's not like there's gonna be a pipe that ends 3 feet from the
Okay.
property and just flows out into them.
Okay, well, I want her property protected
Yes.
from any flow of like, excess water and stuff. And you say this is a 100-year plan and it's just not gonna
Yeah,
happen.
it flows over there now. We're not.
It does, I get that.
Yeah, we're not increasing any of the flow. It's just you're talking about an extremely cataclysmic event.
Okay.
Eventually, it's going to overflow. Yes.
I just want to make sure
Yes.
that was brought up.
Yes.
Any other questions, council? Hearing no other question, chair entertain a motion to approve. Is there a motion to approve the preliminary plat on the Williams property?
Fair, I'll make that motion.
I have a motion by the deputy mayor pro tem. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Johnson. All in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Nay, 3-1. Opposition, 1 opposition. Next item is discussion and consideration of taking action regarding ordinance 22-005, amending chapter 13 of the utility article 1304. Town center sewer. Boy, that's a nasty word around here. The town and code of ordinances by repealing section 1304-24. Council, let me short and sweet of this is we must set up this accounting process and rate system as the Vickery has building out and has residents. We have the CCN on this, which is certificate of the convenience and necessity. So we are the entity that must invoice it, collect the money, and then pass the money along. There's no real profit margin here for the town. It is a necessity that we have to do. Just to clarify and let the town know, this CCN was requested to be released to Cross Timbers water supply. They wanted the CCN for the town of Copper Canyon. However, if we were to release the CCN to the Cross Timbers water supply, we would have then opened up the town for potential sewer installation anywhere in town, even though we have 2 acre minimum, 1 acre minimum lots. So it was potentially a possibility, not an exact, but a possibility. Donna and I went back and forth with Cross Timber for a long time about this before even some of you were on council, and chose that we needed to keep this in our control. That way they can't go around us. And if you read their contract, they could actually put sewer into Copper Canyon under that CCN. Now, whether it was viable financially for them to do it or not, I don't know. But so this is something we must do, and it's time. We have citizens we need to start building. So any questions on that? I don't have all the answers, but I'm sure somebody does.
I will say, we use tell us out of Austin, anytime a town does any kind of rates, they have to have a rate study done. We work with Chris, T. Nolan Perkins, Steve Will, We worked on this for several months. All of these fees, admin time, future maintenance, capital improvement programs will all be billed. This will be built into Vickery or whoever uses sewer. It will not affect any other residents in Copper Canyon, just those that live in that area.
Right, that's correct. Any other questions, council? Hearing no other questions, I'd entertain a motion. A motion to approve or deny.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have a motion by Councilmember Mayor to approve. Do I have a second? I have a second by Councilmember Andrews. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous motion carries. Next item is discussion and consideration of taking action regarding ordinance 22-004, appealing the code of ordinances by amending chapter 14 zoning, exhibit A of the zoning ordinance, article 4, supplementary provisions by repealing section 4-104, accessory buildings. Mr. Chairman, I'm sure there's questions for you, sir. Council, I'll open it up to council for questions to our planning and zoning chairman, Mr. Pate.
If I could, may give some general comments
Over,
and then
please.
that would maybe save some questions. I guess first I want to make it clear to everyone that this is not my ordinance here. This first came up back in January of 21. It was one of several agenda items on a workshop for P&Z and the council and the public. And it was discussed and opinions were gathered from the group. And I was, I guess, nominated as scribe, translator. Then that was brought back to a second working group in July 17th of 21. And again, people made comments and changes. And again, I transcribed them, put them together. Now, that doesn't mean I don't stand by it and I don't support it 100%. I do. But this wasn't just me thinking all of this stuff up by myself. So I want to thank all the members of the workshops as well as the members of P&Z who've helped me with this over time. The reason it was brought to the workshops to begin with is that our ordinances were somewhat confusing, somewhat conflicted. They weren't clear. They had a lot of holes in them. And, you know, I just want to make it clear that while there's a lot of words here, actually what's happening is we're loosening up the regulations here. We're not tightening them. To me, the lighter hand of government is the better way to go. We are, call it a rural community, not a tightly regulated subdivision. So the goal here was to make this more open and more available and create more alternatives for people. So that was the thought behind this. I think the other key issue here is, as Mr. Strancic brought up, is rental. This proposed tonight has nothing to do with rental. What we're doing with this section is we are defining the number, the location, the size, the color, whatever, of accessory buildings. We're not saying what you can do with them. That's an entirely separate section of our ordinances, and I agree 100% that we need a workshop on it. Airbnb, VRBOs could be a problem. Maybe people like them, maybe they don't. That's up to the town to decide. That's not what we're doing here tonight at all. All we're doing is just defining what accessory buildings are and where they can be. And I'd respond to one of the other earlier comments. I think the gentleman said he was on a 1 acre lot and he wanted to put a building in his side yard. That's never been permitted. So we haven't changed that at all. One of the key questions that has come up several times in discussion is the 1,200 square foot lot size of a building on a single acre lot. In the past, it was 2,000. One of the motivations behind this was a concern that people were building structures that were too big for small lots. That's where the 1,200 foot came from. It doesn't affect people who already have a building. It's only this is going forward in the future. And again, if people have an issue and they need something different, there are mechanisms for that. They can talk to the town staff about whether there's alternatives for them to pursue. So the 1,200 square foot on that single acre, that was very strongly supported by members of the P&Z and apparently some members of the community. So if that's really kind of my general comments, but I'd accept questions from the public or the council.
Yeah, yes, I do. A few, as you probably can imagine. Okay, so too big for small lots, 2,000 square feet. Well, we have buildings right now in Chin Chapel North that are 2,000 square feet that are already approved. So when we make the judgment that it's too big for a small lot, that judgment, I assume, is being made by somebody else other than the landowner, correct? Because if the landowner wants to put a 2,000 square foot building on his building, he thinks it's a proper size, or she does.
Yes.
So my point is, how many people on the P and Z committee live in the 1 acre communities?
I don't know. I think 3 out of the 5.
No, the 1 acre community.
Don't know for sure. Don't know. And
Okay,
this was
so-
voted on unanimously by all members of the P and Z.
Well, I got that.
And it was recommended by the public, and you've heard someone read a letter in saying it's fine. So if you have an alternative thing, do you think 3,000 would be big enough for 5,000? Or, I mean, you've got.
I'm not trying to be flippant here.
Well, I am, because I want to know
you
what
are.
size you think is not too big.
I think we had that discussion in the, at the workshop where you were sitting right there where we talked about 2,000 feet where it currently is. That doesn't mean a person has to build a 2,000 foot building. My point is as you drove around Chin Chapel North, where I live in the 1 acre lot, there are a lot of buildings that are over the 1,200 foot building limit already and stuff. And my question that occurs is what's going to happen when that man wants, or a person buys a house that doesn't have a current building on his property, on their property. He sells that property and the new owners go, hey, I'm buying out here in Copper Canyon because I see that guy's got a big 1,500 square foot building over here and I want to build a shop. I want to work on my Mustangs over there or whatever you got. I've had 2 cases of that. And the point is, how are we going to tell that new owner, just because that guy's got 1,500 square feet, you're not going to get it? I don't see that to be fair.
Well, it has, its ordinance has changed, Jeff, and any council, like you said before, any council can change any ordinance
I
at any
understand.
time.
It's not
First of all, second of all, anybody can come to this town and ask for a variance. If there's a special, let's say you have 5 acre tract or a 2 acre tract, you have no other buildings on it, just a house. You have a huge backyard. You can apply for a variance to increase it from 1,200 to whatever, as long as the council approves it.
That's the next question I was going to ask is, because this is not a sword I'm going to die on today, but my point is there's lots of, and you did great work on this. I'm not saying it's bad by any means, but ultimately the question that brings down to is there an appeal process for any landlord, 1 acre, 2 acre, 5 acre, 10 acre, 100 acres, to appeal a negative decision to the town council?
It's a variance. It's a variance to the council. All they have to do is apply for the variance. It's a special use. So you can call it whatever you want, and I can get into.
Okay, there is. Okay,
Yes.
so we do have, because
That's a provision. It's already in place.
I was paging through this and there's several things I couldn't figure out.
Jeff, what happened in the past is we had such a mess of things that people were coming in all the time. And part of this was the original motivation was to reduce the burden on the staff to make all of these changes. So the goal here was to kind of create a general framework that would cover, 80-90% of the cases, and the staff would have to deal then with a smaller number of variances. So
Yes.
that was part of the goal.
Yeah, and that was, we talked about that last summer and stuff like that. And the other issue that concerns me on this profile, once again, being a 1 acre lot owner for 40 years, is that right now in Chin Chapel North, there are 26 homes that butt 2 streets. And they do not have backyards. They have 2 side yards. And if a person sells that house that may not have a building on his property right now, and a person wants to get out of Highland Village or come out of Lantana and says, I have 2 people that want to do that, and I want to build a property on there, we're not going to let them. And they could go to the council and the council won't let them. That's not.
They can also go to the BO, they can go to the Board of Adjustments for a hardship as well, if they need, that's another avenue they have.
to go.
Okay,
And the
as
council
long as
cannot,
there's-
and the council cannot turn that down. The only people that can turn that down
Is
is
the
district
BOA.
court. No, it's district court.
Mhm.
So the BOA, if they could prove hardship and they had two side yards and the scenario as you explained, they can go to the BOA and ask for that. If they're granted, the council can't then overturn it. Only the district court can overturn it. So that is an avenue. This exists.
As long as there's an appeal process, that's all that's important right now. And once again, it's not,
Yeah.
the number of square feet right now is not an issue that I'm going to die my sword on this evening, because as this is can be changed quite a bit. Next question I have is the change in detached garages. Okay, we originally said detached garages, you had to have a breezeway. I know people that have spent the money to attach their breezeway, put a breezeway, live within the limits and stuff, to allow them to potentially build a secondary accessory building on their property. Now with this new ordinance, they've delayed on that process for whatever reason. They haven't built that secondary building yet. Now with this new ordinance, they will not be allowed to do that. Yet they spent the money to conform with the old regulations. That's not, would that be an appeal process again if they wanted to build that building?
You got a fire code that comes into play here, because if now you're increasing the footprint and you're doing an attachment, we have a fire sprinkler requirement that's now in place. It totals to 5,000 square feet.
Well, that's not the issue.
Well, if it becomes attached.
No, that's not the issue. The issue is building a secondary accessory building on their property. They attach the breezeway to comply with our current ordinances so they could build a building. They did not build that secondary accessory building on a 1 acre lot.
Is this a hypothetical?
It is not a hypothetical. It is a real situation.
I'm sorry, I'm just not clear on the facts stating, because whether there's a breezeway or not.
They had a detached garage. Because their home had a detached garage. And you're saying the new thing, detached garages are considered a major accessory building, okay?
No, detached.
Detached garage.
Attached garages are attached garages.
Yeah, they attached the garage with the breezeway to comply so they could build a accessory building to store their vehicles in.
They can still do that. This is not changing that.
You're saying that you're saying a detached garage, breezeway or not, is your major accessory building.
An attached garage, if it's attached by a breezeway under the code, it still is an attached garage. So if they want to build another detached building, they may do that under this structure.
We can't structure this for one individual.
Yep, no, but this didn't change anything, Jeff. There was no intention to change the history here at all.
Well, maybe okay, if I misread that, I apologize. But page 4, well, detached garage shall be considered an accessory building. So a breezeway makes it an attached garage.
That has
no matter what.
No, that's not defining it at all. It just says a detached garage is an accessory building. So the fact that something is attached now, this does not change its attachment or their ability to have something detached.
Okay, I'm reading.
We didn't change any
I'm reading
of that.
section, correct me if I'm wrong. Can I read section number 10 here, number 10? In all residential zoning districts, a building or structure attached to a principal building or structure by only a breezeway shall be considered a detached accessory building or structure.
Yeah, that's been there all along.
No. I'm sorry, Sheila, because it says breezeway having a maximum width. So
nothing's changed.
So, but in 1 acre lots, if you have a detached.
We can't change that, Jeff. It exists today and it's not being changed today. Nothing's changing.
Yeah, I mean, if the council wants to change that, they certainly can. But that was not anything that was changed here in this. I mean, that was the purpose, by the way. I gave you all a red line version so you could actually see what the changes were when they were actually put in. So you could see what was being deleted.
Well, you have a strike through it having a maximum width of 6 feet.
That means it's out.
So if it's attached by a breezeway, it shall be considered a detached accessory building.
Again, nothing's changed and we're not changing it. Let's move on. Councilmember Johnson.
Mark, congratulations to you and the P and Z. I know this, and I know the time that was spent on this. Let's go back to the first question. I'm just curious what the magic is of 1,200 feet versus 2,000 square feet versus 1,500 square feet. I think when I read that, my reaction was 1,200 square feet may be a little skinny, but I've gotten an earful from a number of residents in both Woodlands and in Chin Chapel who have said, hey, I don't want these monster metal accessory buildings in the neighborhood. But I'm just curious, I mean, is there, where did the magic of 1,200 come in versus I think
The answer is there is no magic in that. I wasn't meaning to give Jeff a hard time. I mean, 1,200, 2,000, 3,000, we can pick a number.
And maybe the answer is you
Put
can
it in
request a
perspective.
variance.
I have a 1,200 square foot accessory building in my backyard, and it used to be a four-car garage. So, so it exists, and that's a big building on a 4-acre piece of land, or a 2-acre.
On a 1-acre piece.
Or a 1 acre, yeah. I mean, and mine's on 4 acres, and it's big, So to go beyond that, I think you're really pushing. That's a lot of building. That's a 900 square foot living space. That's bigger than some people's first house. There's a lot there on that. So, yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I was curious.
There was no magic.
Okay.
It was the voice of the community.
Yeah. Council, any other comments?
The only comment I just wanted to add, Mark, I read a lot of the material that you sent my way in terms of your work on this, and it was stellar. Thank you very much. Clearly, there was a tremendous amount of time and work that you put into this. And I just wanted to thank you.
I want to make a couple more comments if I could. One is I included in your packet is a memo about conforming regulations. There are several other regulations outside of this section. What's on the table tonight is just this one section, but assuming that is passed, there are several other kind of minor edits that need to be made in other ordinances. I had asked our town council if he would draft those up for you to make life easy, and he said, no, not until they pass it, then I can come back to them with that. I guess I'm not a lawyer, but my belief would be that those are just conforming changes to match what's here, and therefore they could be handled by the council without having to go back through P&Z and public input and all that other stuff.
Good.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is really this, once again, refer to Ted, Ted gave us some very good comments that were incorporated in here. So I wanted to thank him for his close read of the documents. The version you have included a number of Ted's comments. The issue of rental is, and again, one of the challenges we have, and right at the moment, as I mentioned in my memo, for the benefit of the crowd here, there's like, I think of 3 different ways. There's like investment property where you buy a house and just rent it to people. You don't live there, you just buy it and rent it out. We have no way of knowing that you've done that. We don't have a permitting process that says, I want my house to be rental, so we don't know. The second thing is if you had a granny house or a accessory building or a casita, or even you're upstairs and you wanted to rent it out to a stranger for a month, 6 months, a year. Again, we don't have a permitting process for that. So how would we know? And even if we knew and you were violating something, we don't have an enforcement way to do that. So the third type is the Airbnb or the VBRB, kind of the overnight fraternity party or nice people from out of town that want to live on a ranch for a week or whatever. And that's an optional thing. I think as was mentioned earlier, towns throughout Texas are evaluating that. Towns throughout the United States are evaluating that. And the Texas, I'm not sure it's the Supreme Court, but maybe it's a Texas District Court, is considering a lawsuit on that right now. And so our town attorney has said that he is following this case and he will bring it to the attention of the council or whoever is necessary when there's some resolution. But so that the council at this workshop, that if you do a workshop on rental, it may not be able to make a final position on what is called short-term rentals, STRs, because the state of Texas may have an overriding policy for or against it. I have an article here that I just wanted to.
Let me tag on that just briefly, Mark, if I can. On the Airbnb, and that's, as he said, we have no ordinance in place. We have nothing that lets us not allow it. And what we're going to be working on in the work session, and I've already talked to the city attorney about with Donna, is we have to literally create an ordinance to allow short-term rental to be able to require them to come in for an SUP for us to put guidelines on it to deny it. So we have to create the mechanism for it, put guidelines on it, and then put the mechanism in place that they have to come through the P&Z process and the council process and require an SUP. So if somebody buys it, they want to do it or Airbnb, they actually have to come apply for it. They got to go through the process and then they have to meet all the conditions. So that's something we're going to be putting in place with this next.
Well, one of my recommendations in here is technically, depending on how you read our ordinances, renting is not allowed. Not even rent your son, the apartment upstairs, not even to rent your house. So we need to clarify that within our ordinances so we're not.
Right.
Because this is my personal opinion. If you want to rent your house out, fine. If you want to rent out your casita to somebody, fine. I have different feeling on short-term rentals, but it is people's property. If they want to do something with it, in my opinion, they should be allowed to do that, but that's up to the town to make that decision on what's allowed and what isn't.
This will be more focused towards the wedding venues, the Airbnb, the weekend ranch, dude ranch type. This is going to focus more on that, not on my mother-in-law moving into my guest house.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to focus. This is going to be on the Airbnb. Andre, his problem with the wedding venue on his property. This is going to require that person to come to us and ask permission to do it. But to have permission, they have to have proper parking. They have to have everything, and they have to request the SUPs. Then the council can choose to deny or accept. So, and that's a special use permit.
So I just sent an article around that if you guys can read at your leisure. It's about California's way they treat what they call them. They're British. They call them granny houses. But then they say, as defined in the United States, they're called accessory dwelling units, ADUs, as Americans call them. I've never called them that, but the Brits think we do that. But they're making the point that in California is actively encouraging people to build separate granny houses in the back of their lot and rent them out. They are permitting them by the tens of thousands because California thinks it's greener, greater density is greener because there's less commutes and there's less utility usage and everything. Now, California's California. My personal belief is that anything California does is probably something I don't want to do. So, but I just thought this was an interesting sidelight on where other states are going. They're going quite the opposite from, I think, what we've been looking at.
These people, like most when their neighbors submit a huge accessory building, if it's in the footprint, you have to take out trees. What with your neighbor's view before is now a big building. Like, these are just things we hear, and the neighbors, sometimes they're notified and they come in and they don't. They said, we want to keep the 1 acre lots, but it's like building 2 homes, 3 homes. on a small lot, and then you get the density. Those are just things that we hear.
Yeah, you go from 1 acre to a half acre.
I'd like to make a comment about that on your profile here once again, and I agree with your California comment, by the way. So on the 1 acre lots, if you do build that secondary accessory building and it's going to be habitable, it has to be of the same construction product as the original establishment house on the property of the 1 acre. Did we learn somewhere, did our lawyer tell us that we can't be telling people what they can use for building products if it's outside, as long as it's in the building code and the national building standards? So how can we tell people you have to build your building with the same brick, the same roof, the same everything, if we can't tell them that? I don't get that.
I think that that's a state issue right now. It doesn't allow us that ability, but we do hope that the only thing we can do is stress that needs to have conforming matchiness within reason.
Well, can I make it, I'd like to make.
I don't know how you fix that tonight. That's not part of, how do we attach that to this assessment?
Yeah, that, to me, that's a separate issue. It's kind of stay. I mean, what we don't want is people putting up corrugated metal.
I don't think there's
buildings,
a person in or disagrees with that. I don't know that that's.
Oh, absolutely, you know, and as I drive around my neighborhood, and talk to the people and stuff like that, I mean, we talk about.
I see Mr. Stranzik's neighbor behind him with this huge garage shop, and he's an example.
Sure,
There's an
but
example.
you just go, the 1 acre people, they keep their properties up and they do keep nice buildings on them and stuff like that. So in the Woodlands is an entirely different situation, I believe, here in Copper Canyon compared to what Chin Chapel North is, and maybe in Mobile Drive where our 1 acre zoning is. So it is an issue we have to look at. I don't think throwing out everybody in the one thing and making them build 2 identical homes on a 1 acre is the way to go. But I don't get to make that decision.
There's not an answer to that tonight on this. Let's go back to this topic and get back on topic. So council, we have this in front of you. You've heard the argument. You got 2 options. You can approve this tonight, you can deny this, or you can move this off to a date certain and discuss it at a future workshop. Or this has been worked on a lot. P&Z's approved it. They've done the work. Mark's done the work. So those are your 3 options. My first request is a motion to approve. Do I have a motion to approve?
I make the motion to approve.
I have a motion by Councilmember Andrews to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a second by Councilmember Johnson to approve. All in favor to approve?
Aye.
3, nay. Councilmember Mayor against. I got you. Yes. Next item is discussion of future agenda items. Council, anything to be put on the next agenda item? Hearing none.
Mayor,
okay.
Excuse me. I'm going to request that for a future agenda item that we address Mr. Foster's allegations and for discussion and action, and also in light of the discovery of the CCA, I think that we need to address those issues.
I would refer to our town attorney before we discuss anything in open session under potential litigation. So I would say that could not be an agenda item as an open session. I would refer to the town attorney for guidance on that.
All right,
if you don't mind, sir.
No problem.
Anything else?
I move we adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn, time being 9:18. Second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Castile, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.